Judge recognizes childhood friend on trial. What happens next will shock everyone. The courtroom was thick with tension. Wooden benches creaked softly as people shifted in their seats. The low murmur of whispered conversations bouncing off the tall stone walls. Sunlight streamed through the high arched windows, spilling gold across the polished floors. It was supposed to be just another ordinary trial. At least that's what Judge Eleanor Hayes believed when she walked in that morning. She had done this 1,000 times before. Put on the black robe, sat behind the heavy oak bench, and watched as defendants filed in with chains around their wrists and stories behind their eyes. But today was different. She just didn't know it yet. The state of Louisiana versus James Anderson. The bailiff announced, his voice echoing through the silent room. Eleanor adjusted her glasses, looking down at the file in front of her. Assault, robbery, resisting arrest. Her chest tightened with that all-too-familiar ache. Another life tangled in the system. She prepared herself to be firm, fair, and detached. That was her job. Then the doors at the back of the courtroom opened, and the defendant was brought in. The sound of the chains around his wrists was soft, but to Eleanor, it was deafening. Her breath caught in her throat. She knew that face. James Anderson. For a split second, the world around her blurred. The lawyers, the jury, the spectators, all faded into the background. All she could see was the man standing before her, head slightly bowed, hands cuffed, eyes carrying years of pain. Her mind flashed back like lightning to dusty summer afternoons in Hammond. She saw herself as a little girl, barefoot and wild, racing bicycles down dirt roads. She saw James, a boy with a shy smile and bright eyes, always a step ahead, always turning back to make sure she kept up. They'd spent countless nights lying under the magnolia tree in her backyard, sharing dreams about a world bigger than their small, segregated town. "Do you ever think about leaving this place?" he had asked one night, his hands folded behind his head. She had laughed back then, not understanding the weight of his words. But James had. Even as kids, he saw the world for what it was. Eleanor blinked back to the present, her heart pounding against the weight of her black robe. The man standing before her wasn't the boy she remembered. His face was older now, tired. His shoulders sagged, and his wrists were bound. But his eyes, they were the same. The courtroom was silent, waiting for her to speak. She forced herself to steady her voice. "Mr. Anderson, you stand accused of assault and robbery. How do you plead?" James lifted his head, his voice rough and low. "Not guilty, Your Honor." The trial began, but Eleanor's mind was a storm. Memories she'd buried for decades clawed their way to the surface. She remembered the night everything changed. Her father had found them sitting on the porch together. His voice had been sharp like a knife. "Eleanor, get inside. Now." She remembered James's quiet voice. "Go on. I'll see you around." But they hadn't. His family moved away that summer. And Eleanor, too young to fight back, had let the silence swallow their friendship. Years passed. She studied hard, climbed every ladder, and eventually became a judge. But a piece of her heart had stayed in that little town, under the magnolia tree. And now he was back, not as a friend, not as the boy who shared her dreams, but as a defendant in her courtroom. The prosecution laid out their case like clockwork. A convenience store robbery in Baton Rouge. A clerk assaulted. A man in a red hoodie fleeing the scene. James was found walking nearby shortly after. He matched the description, the arresting officer claimed. The defense attorney, Lisa Porter, fought back. She pointed out the surveillance footage was grainy, blurry, and the timestamps were off. No red hoodie was ever found. No fingerprints matched James. The clerk admitted under oath that he couldn't identify the suspect's face clearly. Still, doubt hung heavy in the room. Eleanor's hands gripped the edge of the bench. She wasn't supposed to feel anything. Judges are trained to be neutral. But every time James raised his eyes to hers, the weight of the past pressed harder on her chest. As the trial continued, Eleanor learned more. After his family moved, James had struggled. He bounced between jobs, neighborhoods, and bad luck. Petty theft charges, loitering, but nothing violent. He had spent his life fighting to be seen for who he was, not what people assumed. The prosecution called Officer Daniel Harris, the arresting officer. He testified, "I saw him walking alone near the crime scene. He fit the description: tall, black male, dark clothing. So I made the arrest." Lisa's cross-examination was sharp. "You had no physical evidence tying him to the crime?" The officer hesitated. "No. No weapon? No red hoodie? No." The courtroom buzzed. Eleanor could feel the shift in the air. For the first time, the jury seemed uncertain. Then it was James's turn. He stood in the witness box, shackled, hands shaking slightly. The room went quiet. "I've made mistakes," he said, voice cracking but clear. "I've trusted the wrong people. I've been in places I shouldn't have been. But I didn't do this." Nobody asked questions. They just decided I fit the picture. All my life, people have decided who I am without ever knowing me. I just want the truth to matter. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the gallery, packed with strangers, felt the weight of his words. Eleanor's vision blurred with tears. She couldn't speak. She couldn't comfort him. She couldn't be his friend. Not here. Not now. The jury deliberated for hours. James sat alone, staring at the floor, while Eleanor stared at the clock. When the foreperson finally stood, the air in the room was thick enough to choke on. "We find the defendant not guilty," gasps, murmurs, and then silence. James exhaled slowly, like a man who'd been holding his breath for years. Eleanor tapped her gavel softly. "The jury has spoken. Mr. Anderson, you are free to go." As the courtroom emptied, James didn't leave right away. He approached the bench slowly, his chains now gone, his hands free. Eleanor stayed seated, her heart in her throat. "You knew me," he said quietly. "Why didn't you say anything?" Her voice shook. "Because if I did, it might have hurt your case. I couldn't risk that." He gave a sad, tired smile. "Fair. The world's never been fair to people like me anyway." Tears welled in her eyes. "I wish I'd done more, James. Back then. And now." He nodded, no anger in his eyes. Just the weight of years they'd both lost. "Take care, Ellie," he whispered, using the name only he used to call her as a child. Then he walked away, the sun spilling through the courthouse doors like a spotlight on his back. Eleanor sat alone in the empty courtroom long after everyone had gone. The wooden benches, the quiet echo of footsteps, the weight of justice. It all pressed down on her. She had upheld the law, yes, but the truth was more complicated. She looked at the bench, the symbol of power she'd built her life around. And for the first time, she truly understood how fragile justice could be. As she stepped outside, the golden sunset wrapped the courthouse steps in light. She made herself a silent promise that day. She couldn't change the past, but she would spend the rest of her career making sure the future didn't repeat it. Not just for James, but for every face that ever stood before her, unseen.